Hello everyone, today we have yet another episode of the series where we take our little microscopes and meticulously examine a known individual in the D&D space to learn from them and become better players and game masters ourselves. In this episode we have a very special subject, as the focus of today's study will be none other than Critical Role's Matthew Mercer, an incredibly skilled voice actor, longtime DM for Critical Role, and probably the most well-known figure in the tabletop RPG space, which is pretty wild. Since Matt Mercer is stepping back as Dungeon Master for Critical Role for the time being, passing the torch off and taking a seat next to his friends as a player for Campaign 4, I think now is an interesting time to look back at Matt as a DM, something he's done an incredible job at for years. Now please keep in mind that the takeaways presented in this video will be from my own observations of watching Critical Role. My sample size is Campaign 3 episodes 1 through 98. In terms of spoilers for Campaign 3, I'll try to stay clear of any major story spoilers, but I will be using clips from the campaign. There won't be any spoilers for Campaign 1 and 2, as I haven't yet seen those campaigns, but I have read your comments and I'll get around to it eventually. Alright, with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's episode of Why Matt Mercer is a Great DM. One of the first things I notice when I look at Matt's DMing is that Matt is someone who's got a very firm grasp of the fundamentals of running a D&D game. First of all, he's clearly very familiar with what he needs to prepare for each session. Coming up with quests, creating NPCs, building appropriate combat encounters, all that core DM prep stuff. That isn't to say that the players don't sometimes go in a direction he hadn't prepared for. That happens to us all. Part of his familiarity with the fundamentals of the game is also the fact that Matt is very attuned to the overall flow of a D&D game. This back and forth flow that exists between the players and DM. The DM lays out a situation and then throws the ball to the players. The players act and then throw the ball back for the DM to decide what happens as a result of that, and so on. This is the rhythm of the game, and part of being a good dungeon master like Matt is appropriately controlling that rhythm, knowing when to step back and just listen and when to pull the players a little bit by increasing the danger. A large part of this is an instinct that comes from a lot of experience listening to your players. There's the prepping, the flow of the game, and, well, the rules. Matt knows the rules of the game really well, and to no surprise, when you're playing D&D, which has a rulebook more than 300 pages long, having just a single person who knows most of the rules is a huge boon. It saves so much time. And in the case of Critical Role, Matt is that guy. Now that doesn't mean he doesn't misremember rules or forgets them. Everybody does. But even in those situations, he'll try to look it up, and if he can't find it, he makes his own ruling and figures it out later. Which I think is the right way to go about it. It keeps the game moving. A major reason Matt is great at this stuff is because he's had a lot of experience DMing this game, and specifically a lot of experience DMing this particular group of players. And that benefits all areas of DMing, because it allows him to lean on his familiarity with the players and the way they all like to play the game. This is the area of D&D where Matt really flexes his voice acting skills, specifically his incredible ability to change his voice with a variety of accents.
Really, just a few deep-pocketed strangers come and see one of our matinee performances and decide out of the goodness in their heart that they're going to look into some disappearances that apparently have been rumored by everyone.
Pitches.
Hi.
Hello, pretty.
Told you!
And ages.
We're gonna be getting up first thing in the morning, so maybe a nice breakfast?
All right, I'm more than happy to do so.
Matt makes the players feel like they're actually standing in front of a large, lumbering ogre or an old lady. It's very impressive to see and it's entertaining, but be careful if you think that Matt's voice skills are why his NPCs are compelling. It's certainly a part of it, but it's more presentation than substance. Underneath, Matt has put work into writing down how these characters behave, how they look, what they think of the world, their background. This is the stuff that actually breathes life into the characters. Voice alone won't do it. That just leads to flair with no substance, no character. The real magic comes from Matt building the character first, and then he uses his skill set to portray that character, and that results in something really special. But the voice part is also so unique to Matt's skill set that it isn't something most of us can replicate. In fact, I'm sure not all the people at Matt's table would be able to either, and they're all voice actors. In this case, we should remember that it is the thought we put into our NPCs that does the majority of bringing our characters to life, not the voice. And then we embody that character in whatever way feels natural. If that means changing the voice, then do that. But don't feel pressured to do it. In fact, that's how I assume Matt does it too. He just tends to change his voice often because he likes to do that. Something I've started to pay attention to as I've watched Critical Role is the way Matt builds a campaign story. Rather than putting together a random general plotline and praying to all the deities in the pantheon that the player characters will be eager enough to want to participate, Matt does something different. Matt seems to be very involved in the character creation process, where a lot of the players will include what I like to call unresolved mysteries in their backstory. An example of an unresolved mystery would be a character whose sister disappeared one night, leaving behind nothing but a written piece of paper in an unfamiliar language. As you can tell, that leaves a lot of questions floating around. Where did the sister go? Why did they vanish? Did this happen to others? What does that mysterious paper say? The key component is that there's missing information that leaves room for Matt to fill in with answers. And he can tailor these answers in such a way that they play into the main storyline he's planned. He'll sort of follow the threads from the player characters and try to weave it into the campaign plot, which is no easy task. Matt's playing at a table with 7 players, yet somehow he finds a way to at least somewhat weave the threads together. What that does is it creates natural motivation for the characters to follow the main story, because it's tied to their personal story, and that's gold to players who love roleplay. They'll have a lot more fun rescuing prisoners from an archdevil if one of them is their sister. And in the case of Matt's game, the characters that don't simultaneously get explored through the main plotline, he finds ways to incorporate as side missions, or something for the players to focus on when they can't immediately progress the main story. That ensures that everyone gets to have the spotlight for a time. It just so happens that occasionally the players surprise Matt with something he didn't expect. Whether that is the players messaging an NPC he didn't expect, making an unexpected choice, or being dead set at looking for a very particular kind of store. Fortunately, in these situations, Matt is a very adept improviser. He's got a good enough grasp of his world and enough experience that the things he makes up on the spot still manage to be coherent. They don't feel out of character for the world, and that element is important. As a dungeon master, your character is the world. And just like player characters behaving out of character feels off, the same goes for the world. In Matt's game, if someone asks, "Hey Matt, is there a magic item shop here?" Matt wouldn't just immediately go, "Yes, there is." He would think about the question for a second and come to an answer that feels realistic. He might go, "Well, this is a small village that doesn't really have a whole lot of enchanters here, so no." But you might be able to find an herbalist store that could have potions in stock if that's what you're looking for. This would be an answer that would attempt to accommodate the players, but do so in a way that would still feel in character. In this theoretical scenario, Matt could have said yes and decided that a magic shop does exist in this village. That decision would give the players exactly what they asked for, but something would be off. In Exandria, Matt's world, stuff doesn't exist without some sort of logic to it. Large cities need guards, cities that have guards have smiths to craft and maintain their equipment. The iron used by the smith is mined and transported from mining operations elsewhere in the world. The logic is an important part of how that world works, and deviating from that means losing a part of the immersion, that feeling that this imaginary world is believable. verisimilitude, as Colville likes to call it. That herbalist store might not have been something Matt had prepped, but the players prompted it, and it makes sense that it exists, so it does. And then there are a few things I know that Matt preps specifically for improv scenarios. Stuff like having a list of random NPC names to pick from, and some lists or tables of items with prices are extremely helpful in those situations. Matt Mercer is an absolute wordsmith when it comes to crafting visually descriptive sentences.
Our story, however, begins to the northwest of the Hellcatch Valley, within the natural boundaries of the Serpentwine Peaks, where the lush jungle valley of the Odiran Wilds thrums with life and mystery. Here among the vines and mists that choke the uncarved paths of the rainforest, howling beasts in long dormant shadows are rumored to hide among the lost relics of ancient days.
Descriptions that make his players smile and laugh, squint and contort, shiver and queef, a full spectrum of emotions. And that's an extremely valuable skill to have as a dungeon master. Words are most of all you have. D&D is unique in the sense that it is brought to life almost entirely in our imagination. Imagination that is triggered through words. In Matt's case, these words don't just exist on descriptions he's written down on paper, he has them stored in his mind ready to be pulled out at any moment. And that creates an almost seamless transition between his pre-written descriptions and the stuff that comes to him in the moment. Which sort of feeds back into his improv skills, because it means that even when he's improvising, he never skips a flavorful description.
Hello?
As you step in, your voice kind of echoes, hello, 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 through the halls, and you can see the exterior doesn't quite, while it looks like it's a tall, flat front, the hall continues deep into the rock behind it, and you can see it's this kind of almost like looking down the rib cage of the interior of a massive whale. Like the halls have this kind of natural curvature that comes to a singular point where lanterns hang, and it just seems to go on forever.
It's wonderful that even with small spontaneous ideas, Matt is able to honor them with fitting verbal illustrations. That really gives the players the feeling that they can go anywhere in the world, even though they realistically can't. DMs have limitations, even Matt. There's only so much you can improvise before the quality starts degrading. But it's not so much about the players literally being able to go anywhere, more so than it is about the illusion of it. It goes back to that immersion, that feeling that the players can reach their hand out expecting a wall, but instead find themselves stretching their arm completely. And flexible boundaries is what can create that feeling, because there are boundaries, at least in the style of game that Matt runs. But keeping them flexible, being prepared to improvise, allows you to stretch the walls a bit so they remain just enough out of reach that the players can believe they aren't there. That they can forget boundaries and just play. Generally, I wouldn't say that tactical combat is a key component in the style of D&D critical role plays, which is all good, that isn't the focus of the show. But that also means that most of the time, you don't realize that Matt has quite a sharp mind for tactics. In fact, at a regular viewing of Critical Role, you probably wouldn't even think Matt was any more strategic than your average DM. In most combats, he plays the creatures in the way that makes sense for that particular creature, which often doesn't necessarily correspond with the most strategic move. Matt deliberately doesn't utilize his full tactical abilities in every combat, because he likes when a creature behaves in a way that fits the creature. And that's cool. But that also means that whenever Matt does put the players up against a creature that would be tactical, that foe becomes significantly more dangerous. In those moments, there's a complete shift in the energy of the players. Please skip to this part of the video if you want to avoid seeing a clip from a major fight in Campaign 3.
That's going to be a 20 to hit.
Yeah.
For 14 points of slashing damage.
I'm down.
Oh, God.
Wait, what? I'm down.
Ashton's down.
He's more than 30 feet away from me,
Barbarian's
isn't he?
down, not raging.
I'm down. I was very high.
There's an immediate felt tension and fear when they realize that Matt isn't messing around in this fight, and that pushes the players to take the fight seriously and work together more, which is fitting for what those moments represent for the characters. There's this neat overlap between the energy of the characters and the energy of the players. The characters are facing a skilled opponent, this adversary, and the players are facing a skilled opponent, Matt. Not literally, obviously, that would be a crazy show. Matt isn't their enemy, he's just there to challenge them. And boy does he challenge them. Matt Mercer is fierce when he needs to. And that last part is important. When he needs to. Not every fight needs to be a near-death experience. But sometimes, in order to respect the seriousness of the story, it does. And in those moments, it helps to have proper strategy in your tool belt. At the core of Matt's DMing, there is passion, a very deep-seated one. There's a passion for roleplay, for storytelling, for cool game mechanics, for fantasy, for games, for acting. It's in everything he does, and that passion is infectious. You can feel it. It spreads to the players, and it spreads to the viewers. Just like it's no surprise that when you combine skill, a fine-tuned instrument, and a love of music, wonderful songs come out of it. It's no surprise that when Matt combined skill, a fine-tuned toolkit, a love of DMing, and, let's be honest, an incredible group of players, wonderful stories come out of it. I can't help but admire Matt's incredible ability to facilitate this game. Not in a Matt Mercer effect way, but in the same way an aspiring filmmaker looks at their favorite film and can't help but be inspired by its creator. As a role model, not a superior. When I look at the skills that make Matt a great DM, I don't see it as unachievable. In fact, with enough experience and the right tools at your disposal, I think it's quite achievable. Yes, most of us will probably not become as skilled voice actors as Matt, but there are also a lot of skills involved that'll make you a better DM that has nothing to do with that, as I've hopefully illustrated in this video. So be careful with letting perfection stop you from DMing. You may not become a skilled DM with a passion for it and exceptional voice acting skills, but you can definitely become a skilled DM with a passion for it. And that's pretty awesome if you ask me. Not that I imagine Matt will ever hear this, I still want to leave this video with a message. Matt, from what I've seen, you've done a hell of a good job DMing these past 10 years. Not a perfect job, but a good job. You make mistakes, you forget mechanics, make silly rulings, make mistakes in the narrative from time to time, but in some ways, that's better. Because even in those moments, for the people who look up to you, that tells them that that's okay. That it's okay to make mistakes. You're not perfect, none of us are. And that's a big part of what makes you a great role model in this community. But I can also imagine wanting a break from carrying the DM mantle for so many years. And I think you deserve that. We're all very curious to see what the next campaign entails. With that, a huge thank you to Matthew Mercer, and to you watching, have a wonderful day or night, and as always, may the dice roll in your favor.